I don't have anything else to say about the matter. I'm talked out. I mean, I told you how I feel. I said I understand how you feel, but where are we going with this?
Did you push record?
Thank you so much for tuning into our second act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life. How you doing, Silka?
I'm doing great. We are going to have so much fun today. We're already laughing because while we were talking off camera, we have a guest with us. We were teasing. We said, we're going to have our first three-way today.
It's going to be fantastic.
How else do you call it? A three-way call. That's what it says. Anyway, bring on Robert Manni, the author of The Guy's Guide to Love. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, ladies. It's a pleasure to be here, and we had so much fun previously, Silka, that I'm so delighted to be back and to be with Paige.
Well, exactly, and that's really, when we talked, and we talked a lot off camera also, and we'll link to our previous segments, but that's when I said, you have got to meet Paige, because in a sense, in a lot of ways, you two are the male and female versions of each other, and in your missions, and that's... we want to talk about that today, and our topic that we want to discuss and how this all was brought together is men, emotions, and relationships, especially at this time of our lives. That is still the big mystery, the communication gaps, etc. And what do we need to know? Well, let's talk about that. How can we pass on some good information? Why it's difficult, or maybe not, to find love again and have a successful relationship after 50.
So I'm going to jump in because I'm going to ask Robert to start. And, with the times that we're in, Robert, how tenuous things are, how for women, it's taken us backward steps, fighting to be heard, to get our voice out there. And I know just from all the men that I work with who come to see me, it's hard for them. They're afraid to move right. They're afraid to move left. They're afraid to do anything anymore because for them, life has changed. So I thought we'd start off with that and kind of hear, your perspective, what you've seen with this, where you think men are. So I'm just going to be quiet for a moment and let you jump right in with that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. My perspective, I've kind of developed a platform based on my novel, The Guy's Guide to Love, which has been called the men's successor to Sex and the City. And it's different than ladies in Sex and the City because there you have four women. They go out, they have their cosmopolitans, they talk about men. But men don't roll that way. It's similar to, John Gray's book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And socially, it's that way very frequently where guys don't really share emotions with each other. I can count on one hand how many times a man has said to me, how do you feel about that? I mean, we just don't do that. We have problems and solutions. And if you really have a real issue, you don't put it out in front of all your buddies. You pull one aside that you really trust or think he has the expertise to help you, and you'll ask him. And that's, I think, a very different dynamic than women who are much more open to sharing what their issues are and batting things about. And the same thing happens in my book where the two guys are frenemies, they're buddies, they're lone wolves, though, in terms of how they deal with relationships, and it all plays out in a very interesting way. So based on that, I started blogging because the book is about relationships. And I kind of was like life imitating art because in the book, the main character writes a column about men for women. So I started writing about men for women, and then I started Guys Radio, my radio show and podcast, and we discuss everything to help men and women kind of live their best lives. And a lot of it is based on relationships, but also we do wellness and diet and metaphysical things and spirituality, etc., because these are the things that are now coming to the focus of where men are and where women are today. More and more, there's kind of an awakening happening. There's a lot of false starts there, but there is a true awakening simmering under the surface. And I think people like us can really help people. And I think men in particular really need help because they're not comfortable in articulating how they feel about things. That's and it's important because when you keep things bottled up, they go boom at some point.
Well, and that's exactly right, Robert. And that's why, we've had this conversation before, and that's what we said, we need to talk about this together. Incidentally, I read the book, loved it. So I'll be sure to link to it if people get it. It's a really, really, really fun read.
Thank you. That was the idea. Have truth in the power of story and make it fun and make it a beach read, but actually have it be about something. So I think you probably figured out there is actually a undercurrent of business and also spirituality throughout the book, even though it's kind of a sexy romp. And there's plenty of sex in the book, too.
Yeah, and you know what I've found from a woman's perspective, working with men for a long time, and men from whether it's businessmen, men in different careers, to my special ops men who are like the man's man of nothing gets through them, they're good to go. If I give them a book and say, hey, read this first, it helps them so much more, and it's not as threatening. And with their brain, they're better able to take information in and feel like someone's not breathing down their throat. So they get the information that way. And then I can kind of come in and talk from a different perspective where they don't feel as threatened. And I've just seen that a man's brain does really well when you give them a book or when you give them research or when they can get some kind of facts with that. And then for them, they're not as threatened and they're a little bit more open to say, okay, I'm understanding the theory behind this. I'm seeing what a man says. So now I'm a little bit more open to open up the door to hear from a female's perspective. So what are your thoughts on that, Robert?
I think you're absolutely right. It's not easy to get through to guys, but I think if you pull them aside one-on-one, like working with you, and you give them something that's factual, if you quote unquote factual, it's a book, at least it's documented, they can go through it and then it starts to help them open up. It was interesting. I went for a run this morning. I went for a swim in the ocean. I came out and there was a big group of guys, maybe about 20 guys. I don't know why they came to this beach at this time, but I was like, wow, I wonder if they would think I'm totally full of baloney in what I'm doing, or if they, each one individually, would be open to learning more and really wanting to learn how to articulate how they feel and be better communicators. And I think that is actually the truth, but it's just so hard to get to men because as a group, they get all like cavemen-like, and then when you separate them individually, you find under that tough exterior, there is an openness underneath. And I think a lot of men really want more. I have found dealing with friends and other people that they'll ask me a question. Hey, what do you think about this diet? What do you think about giving up meat? What do you think about, mercury or whatever? And I get that individually. Yet as a group, when you've made it in social media, when you post something, you start to get some haters too. And it's always the guys.
Yes.
But it's interesting in how you have to break through to get to a guy. And I actually think it's a little bit different for a man getting through to another man versus a woman coming from a position of intelligence and credentialization to get through to a man.
I just want to validate what you said when you came out of the water and there was a group of men and you thought, hey, what would they think about this? 100% on the money, because when men come to see me, they want to know, how do I connect with my wife or my significant other or my daughter? I don't know what to say, what she's pushing me. And, it's that anxiety, it's that anger. And what I have seen is that it's very easy for men to go to a place of anger because that's what they know really well. But to break that down and teach them, hey, guess what? There's other emotions behind and below that anger that really is what you're going through. It's like this really ornate type of thing for them to tap into. So helping them also go to their heart center by using different meditations or just having them go into their body really helps them too. But again, taking it very, very slow. I'm a firm believer that we are all souls, that we all have the ability to do this. But in this human world that we live in and societal norms that we have brought up with, there hasn't been a space or an opening for little boys and men to say to little boys, hey, it's okay to feel, it's okay to cry, it's okay for this. So thoughts on that, Robert?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you. And I think the younger generation, I have a 6-year-old, believe it or not, and his generation and himself, very open to just, this is how I feel. And they filter. And I think it's great. However, it's tough for older guys, because, say, oh, it's okay to cry. But you better not cry too much. And because I don't think women really, I think I've interviewed a lot of relationship experts, and to a person, they've all told me the same thing. Women want men to be men in the best sense of the word. And that's where guys get caught in the crosshairs, because if you're a millennial, you're caught between MMA on one side of the continuum and manscaping, and you don't know really what am I supposed to really be doing. But I actually think the millennials are more open-minded than you get to the boomers, and it's like, here's my job, here's my paycheck, here's what kind of bourbon I like, and you're not going to tell me what to do. Yes. And it's very defensive, and there is an underlying current of anger in men. I can tell you, I have it. I work constantly. I talk to my guys and everything, help me manage this. It's part of it, but I actually think even anger comes from a place of love. I think everything starts with love, and then things get out there and it gets messed up in how we deal with each other, what's going on culturally, and it's really challenging to unravel all of this to live our best lives.
Don't you think, too, that for men, this can happen for women as well, but I see it stronger for men, that anger for them is a protection? Because I think there's a lot of fear of, oh my God, what is this going to feel like? How am I going to look to this female? Am I too vulnerable? She wants me to be a man and be strong, but then on the flip side, I have to figure out when and how to flip the switch to kind of go to that vulnerable place. And then when I do decide to open up and be vulnerable, she comes in and says, wait a minute, well, that's not, what are you talking about? That's not what I wanted to hear. And it's mixed messages a lot that occur sometimes.
I think a lot of that, Paige, is I think men to a man, they don't like criticism. I have a friend, and he...
Very fragile. Very
fragile. And interesting, he was married for 22 years, and he told me he was getting a divorce. And I said, why? And ultimately, when he broke it all down, it was that his wife was not finding him to be as funny as he used to be. Now, maybe his jokes were repetitive. I don't know. But that was coming from I thought that was very strange, yet very telling in terms of men being very sensitive to criticism and needing their partner, and women in general, to kind of boost them up and say, you're really great. And women come at it, in my opinion, from a place of they want the relationship to be as good as it can possibly be. So what we take as guys as criticism is like, oh, no, not again. Women just want to work through things and say, let's make sure we're both hearing each other, because the way guys communicate is, okay, what do you have? You have a problem? What do you have to say? Let me think about it. Well, I feel this, or you've convinced me to feel that, and that's it, let's move on. But I notice even with conversations with my wife, I'm like thinking, are we done yet? And it just keeps going because we're wired differently. And I don't want to say like, I don't have anything else to say about the matter. I'm talked out. I mean, I told you how I feel. I said, I understand how you feel, but where are we going with this? And I think that's very typical of how sometimes men and women get on the different pages, even though they have that kind of bond together. Things happen. What do you think, ladies?
You're right on the money. And can I say two things that kind of pulls right into what you said? The fragility of men, I see sometimes they're more fragile than women in many ways. And women will say this to you, and Silke, I'm sure that you'll attest to this. Women will consistently tell me all the time, oh my gosh, I cannot continue to be his mother and boost him up because no one's boosting me up. I hear that constantly.
I would agree, yes.
Yeah, and another thing too is, I come to attachment. How, when we come into this world, into the womb and further and, other lifetimes, which we can talk about at another time, but, how we come into this world and how we either attach or we don't attach really is a big component too when you finally get into these relationships and these mixed messages of how did you attach when you first came into the world? What was the modeling that was being done of, okay, what's the okay way to attach? How are you allowed to attach? How much trauma have you had through your lifetime that stops you from attaching, on top of how your brain is wired differently from a woman? So there's all these different components that goes on. And then we put on right now, currently, what's going in the world with women and how men are unsure of, I'm afraid of what to say, I'm afraid of what to do, because women are just up there, we're in your face now, we're sick and tired of being pushed down. And so there's all these things just kind of banging heads. So I'll kind of put that out there to you, Robert, about the attachment component too.
Well, I think that it's never been, if you're a guy's guy, emotionally available, and somebody who has timeless style, is consistent, who shows up, who's confident but not arrogant, who's respectful of women and children and older people. There's never been a better time to be a guy because there's so many men confused. But if you are a guy's guy, as I like to call it, it's fantastic because women are now getting long overdue recognition. And that's good. And women can take a lot of the pressure off the man's plate. But men have to be there in other ways for women to make sure that the woman knows she's appreciated. And it's not just about problem solving or bringing home the money. It's okay if you want to have a more traditional role that we had 30, 40 years ago. And boomers obviously came from a world where the man works, the woman may or may not. And then at the end of the day, the roles are very, very clear. Now it's kind of a mesh. I was president of an ad agency. Now I'm bringing my son, 6 years old. I'm the oldest dad there by far, to school and picking him up and building my own business. My wife now, she's out working at the Department of Education, and she would rather be doing what I'm doing, but right now, due to necessities and how, all the stuff that goes in account of that, we're doing what needs to be done. So we have to take extra time to figure out, well, how can I be supportive, of my wife's dream while she's supporting me now? And I'm in a completely different situation where I was like leader of men, and now I'm dealing with the kindergarten teacher. And it's a lot. And I think women can handle it a lot better than men can. And I think they are handling it a lot better than men can. But the possibilities are endless if men can see that, things change. They're not going to go back. Women are on this steady path of long overdue recognition, and it's a really good thing if you look at it with positive eyes.
Well, we have... Go ahead.
Hold on
Go
a
ahead,
second. Women can do it better because we have had to do it better.
Right.
So men haven't had to. So it's like anything. If you haven't practiced it, you don't know what you don't know. So you're going to do it, and it's going to look messy, and that's okay. But as long as you're doing it and it's messy, women will hang in there with you. And with women as well, most of the time, women want to be nurtured and cherished and heard, where you can hold the space and just sometimes give her a hug. Even though many times men will say to me, how the hell do I hug a cactus when she's this and that? And I went, that's the time that you hold a cactus, when it is that way. So just wanted to jump in there. Go ahead, Silka.
No, I was just, I'm loving listening to you guys talk.
I love Robert. We could just keep going on and on.
I know we're going way longer than we usually do, and that is great. Well, obviously you've thrown out a lot for us to think about, especially after 50, and how things have changed and how that affects our relationships, and certainly the need for what we're talking about, which is understanding men, women, and their emotions. Yeah. One thing that another term that was thrown out, emotionally unavailable or available. That is something I really want to concentrate on in our next segment. We're about 18 minutes in. Would you like to say your famous last words, Paige and Robert, to close this segment out?
Why don't we have Robert say this time? Go ahead, Robert. What would you like to say to close the segment out? Because usually I do that.
Well, again, I think it's the best time ever to be a man if you handle it the right way and see the positive side of it. And also, I'd ask everybody to listen to Guys Radio all over the internet. You can download it anywhere.
Yeah, we are going to link to all of Robert's information. Again, I love the book. What a great read. Yes, we will link to your platform. And Paige, we will see you and Robert on our next segment of Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right over here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see that little bell next to the subscribe button, hit that too. You'll be notified every time we post a new video. See you next time.